Day 1, 8:30, scheduled day, and we have now the talk from Mitch Altman. Make cool things with microcontrollers, and I've seen some things I do find really cool now. Have fun and give him a welcome.
Well, thanks for coming, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? So, there's some info about me, and I've been doing a lot of stuff with microcontrollers for a long time. I came to 23C3, and Fubud out there had a little workshop where teaching people to solder, and that was just so much fun that I've been doing workshops at maker fairs and hacker conferences and other conferences ever since, just all these workshops and even like little house parties, teaching people how to make cool things with microcontrollers, and it's so much fun to do this. You get a whole bunch of people in a room building things, and it's like little kids playing with blocks. Everyone has smiles on their faces. And I'm going to be doing a workshop here, probably later tonight after Lady Ada's talk, which is after mine. And then the next day, either down in the Hackspace or in the Fubud area just by the stairs over here. So if anyone wants to learn to make cool things with microcontrollers, come on by. I got lots of parts, and you can be as happy as these folks. And really, anyone can learn this stuff. It's not hard. And no matter how much you learn, there's always more to learn, which is part of the fun of it. But just to make some cool things is really easy to start with. So one of the main things with microcontrollers is the hardware for all of the simpler things is basically the same. You just change the firmware, which is the controlling software, and you end up with something totally different. So here's 3 examples of something that I started with pretty much the same hardware and came up with something very different hardware-wise and functionality-wise. So the Brain Machine, if any of you were around at Chaos Camp, you probably saw those, and this is what they look like. They blink lights and pulse sound at brainwave frequencies, and your brain synchronizes to it, and you hallucinate really cool colors and patterns from your subconscious mind. People tend to like hallucinating, so it's kind of fun. And this trippy RGB light just mixes colors to make this sort of little mood light. It's totally meaningless but fun. This BugBot, he's crawled off of tables a lot, but he still kind of does his thing. He eats light, and he gets excited when he eats light, and his tail spins around. And yeah. So then I have some other examples here. This LED cube at Forming Hackspace in New York City. This is the first project out of there. It's this little LED cube, a miniature version of what I saw at Chaos Camp from Metal Lab. I don't know if you can see under this light, but it just blinks lights in a 3D pattern. Life-changing event, of course, but it's fun. And then I also hacked TV Be Gone, which is this, and all of it came out of this kit here, which is a mini POV made by Lady Ada, who makes lots of cool kits to teach beginners and experts alike how to make cool things out of microcontrollers. This thing, there she is waving it back and forth, and that's this thing here. So if you wave it, I don't know if you can see, but you can program it through this serial port. Any computer that has a serial port or a USB port with a USB to serial converter can program this chip, and it's really super easy and fun to build. Just about anyone can do it, even if you've never soldered before. One of the cool things with this is it's open source. So everything's free, and you can download it from the web, except for, of course, for the parts themselves, which are pretty cheap. And since it's open source and all the info is online, and there are cool workshops where people can teach you stuff, it's easy to hack. So you can hack any of those other projects that I showed you. Yeah, so I'm going to talk mainly about this one, but I'll say a little bit also about a TV Be Gone kit, which came from hacking this into a TV Be Gone. One thing, just to go back to those other slides, look at the hardware of these things. You can see that all of them have this board on it. The hardware really is the same. You can see the serial port on all of them, and maybe the chip, the BugBot, it's kind of hard to see because it's covered in a solar panel, but they're all hacked from that. So the Brain Machine, I wrote an article in Make Magazine issue number 10, which came out this past summer, and it's been way more popular than I thought. I had a lot of ideas about why that might be fun to do, and I guess it's resonated with a lot of people, and it's cool. Later on, I've got a whole bunch of them if you want to try them out just for a few seconds or for a long time. Just find me. I'll have them at my workshop, and you can check it out. I've got a few pictures I'll show you of what people look like when they're wearing them, and you can be one of them. But let me talk about brainwaves a little bit. There's a whole spectrum of brainwaves that any person's brain, if they're alive, emits. So, and they're somewhat arbitrarily, but somewhat functionally divided up into 5 bands. So the lowest ones, well, let's start with beta. Beta is what most healthy adults are emitting when they're awake and thinking. Like right now, you're listening to me. If you're not spacing out and daydreaming, like you, then you're in beta waves. That's when you're just sort of thinking about stuff and not too deeply, but just paying attention. Then alpha waves is what happens if you're kind of like drifting off, and if you're going between awake and asleep. And I can't help but put a dig into TV. There's only one thing that has ever put people into alpha waves, and only alpha waves, in 2 million years of human existence on the planet, and that's TV. So alpha waves is associated with total passivity. Now, there's nothing wrong with alpha waves. We couldn't live without them. However, if you're only in alpha waves, then all of the crap that is being put in TV programming and commercials goes right into your subconscious, so whether you're conscious of it or not. So, okay, the next level down, lower frequencies, is theta waves, and if you're just doing theta, that means you're deep asleep. But if it's theta in conjunction with some other things, there's also different states of mind. And delta is the next one down, and that's like way down there. But it's interesting that when you're in a creative process, and that can be whatever realm you're in. If you're a software geek and you're just way into debugging or figuring out a new cool project, you'll be pulsing some delta waves, and there'll be theta, there'll be alpha, there'll be beta, there's all this stuff going on at once. And, or if you're a runner really in a groove, or if you're a fire and brimstone preacher preaching hellfire, you know, in a groove there. Everyone in that groove has a pretty similar brainwave pattern that you can measure with an electroencephalogram. And I'll talk more about that in a sec. Another state of mind that deals with all of these brainwave types is meditation, something I've been doing pretty much all my life and get a lot of benefit from it, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to make the Brain Machine, was to kind of trick people into trying it out. So I made it fun to try out. Yeah, the hallucination stuff. So the next thing is gamma waves, and I don't use that in the Brain Machine because when you try to stimulate brains with gamma, people tend to get anxious, and there's already enough anxiety in our world already, so I figured I'll stay away from that until we learn more about it. There's not a whole lot known up in there. Some of these slides are left over from my talk at the camp. I don't want to go over all of it because we don't have a whole lot of time, but basically, meditation, we can play with brainwave frequencies. The Brain Machine, let me back up a step. The Brain Machine plays brainwave frequencies into your brain if you're wearing the Brain Machine through these pulsing lights. and through this headphone jack into headphones. So these brainwave frequencies synchronize your brain to the frequencies that they're pulsing at. And it works on 90% of people who try it. The other 10% just don't like it. So 90% is pretty good. That's better than most medications. And so given that this works on a lot of people, we can give a brain a sequence to follow. And what I made for the brain machine is a meditation sequence. So one of the rules with synchronizing a brain to external frequencies, which has a fancy name called entrainment, you start where the person's at and then bring them where they want to go. You cannot bring them where they don't want to go, which is why the Secret Service of the US and the Soviets dropped all of this research. And so anyways, with meditation, you start with someone who's awake, so it's beta waves, and then you start adding a little bit of alpha, reduce the amplitude of the beta, hang out there for a while, and then go into theta, bring in some more sort of subconscious activity. And now you have a unique situation where you have some conscious activity with the beta, some subconscious activity with the theta, and this alpha to kind of bridge it. So you can be more conscious of stuff which is normally subconscious, or so the theory goes. And then you start pulsing some delta to trigger off some creative thought, and hopefully you're connecting with some really cool stuff deep inside that doesn't normally come up, and you can do cool ideas, cool projects, whatever. It's all inside of you. Go in there, check it out, you'll like it. Really briefly on the history of this, there's a lot written about this, but I'm just going to run through it. People have been doing altered states of consciousness ever since people have been bopping around. So one of the early ways that we still use is through trance dancing. And the drumming in older societies is in alpha and theta wave frequencies. So that perhaps synchronizes people all in a group with this context of all going to this cool place together, and it can get pretty high. In the 2nd century, there's this guy Ptolemy who really loved it when he noticed through a spinning wheel some light shining through it, and he started hallucinating, and he wrote about that. And that's left down. It wasn't until the 1920s that we had a machine to actually measure brain waves, and people were into radio and all this stuff, and you could measure the emissions of a brain with the invention of an electroencephalogram, EEG. And this guy in the 30s was the first one to use it to measure humans' brain waves. And he actually used the frequencies to put people in a base set of frequencies so that he could do other things to the subjects with their permission to see what changes. And this guy's name is W. Gray Walter, and incidentally, he did a lot of the early work in robotics. His main thing was trying to figure out what is a mind and how does it work. So he tried to build robots to model what he thought was the workings of a brain and see, by building these robots, does it actually behave like an animal? And he found a lot of interesting correlations. Way interesting character, you can look him up. A lot of books of his are still in print. Fascinating reading. In the 50s, there was this Beat Generation guy, friend of Jack Kerouac and all these other people, Burroughs and Ginsberg, etc. Brian Gysin. Most people haven't heard of him, but he was behind the scenes in a lot of these characters and gave them a lot of the ideas that they became famous for. They ran in crews with him. One thing that he created was the Dream Machine, which is pictured there. It's got some cool looking slots, and it stands on a 78 RPM turntable and spins around, and you put a light bulb inside and you sit down like these folks are doing with their eyes closed, and then they start tripping out on alpha waves. And people have since changed it to 45 RPMs because 78s are hard to come by, and a friend of mine built it, and this was at a party of his, and I had a bunch of brain